Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you happen to be. Today, I want to speak to you about something that every human being carries inside them, whether they know it or not. Something that grows in the dark, strengthens in the storm, and blooms in the aftermath. Resilience. Resilience is not perfection. It's not strength all the time. It is the quiet, trembling decision to rise again, sometimes with confidence, sometimes with tears. And to understand resilience, we don't have to search ancient history or dusty textbooks. We can look at people who walk the same streets we do, breathe the same air we breathe, and face battles that feel impossible. Today, I'll share their stories. Stories of modern humans, ordinary and extraordinary, who stood back up when life tried to keep them down. Let me begin with the story of a man named Chris Nickick. Chris was born with Down syndrome. From the moment he entered the world, he faced obstacles most of us will never know. Physical therapy started early. Doctors offered predictions about limitations. People underestimated him constantly. But Chris did something remarkable, something quiet and beautiful. He started a habit he called the 1% Better Challenge. Every day, he tried to improve by just 1%. One more push-up, one more step, one more moment of believing he could do something others said he couldn't. Eventually, he set his eyes on something nobody believed possible for someone with his condition: an Ironman triathlon. Think about what that means. A 2.4-mile swim, a 112-mile bike ride, a full marathon. Most people will never complete one in their lifetime. Chris trained anyway. He trained through exhaustion, through doubt, through the days when progress felt like it had stopped. And on a day the world will never forget, Chris crossed the finish line and became the first person with Down syndrome to complete an Ironman. Not because he was born strong, not because he was born fast, but because he believed that resilience is built one small victory at a time, 1% by 1%. His story teaches us something powerful. Resilience rarely shouts. Most of the time, it whispers. It whispers, "I'll try again tomorrow. I'll take one more step. I'm not done yet." Now, I want to tell you about a woman whose name you likely know, Shania Twain. Today, she's a global superstar with awards and albums and millions of fans. But many people don't know the chapter of her life that almost ended her career forever. After years of touring, Shania began experiencing vocal problems, something every singer fears. Doctors discovered dysphonia caused by Lyme disease, a condition that stripped away the very instrument she built her life on: her voice. Imagine that. Imagine waking up one day and the thing you're best at, the thing that defines you, supports you, expresses you, simply doesn't work anymore. For years, she stepped away from music. Her marriage fell apart during the same period, adding heartbreak to physical pain. She once said she felt like a bird with broken wings. But healing, for Shania, wasn't a moment. It wasn't a dramatic comeback. It was a slow rebuild, a fragile, emotional journey through therapy, training, and rediscovering herself. And eventually, after nearly a decade in silence, she did something extraordinary. She returned to music with an entirely new voice. Not the voice she once had, not the effortless sound the world remembered, but a voice shaped by resilience, raspier, deeper, forged by suffering and recovery. She stood on stage again, not because she regained what she lost, but because she learned to thrive with what remained. Her story teaches us that resilience is not always about getting something back. Sometimes, it's learning to live powerfully with what you have now. These are the kinds of stories that will guide our journey today: real people, modern fighters, humans who faced darkness and somehow found a way to say, "Not yet. Not like this." In the next section, we're going to explore resilience through the lens of failure, fear, and reinvention, and I'll introduce you to more remarkable individuals whose lives illuminate the path forward. Let's talk about someone who showed the world that resilience isn't always about pushing through. Sometimes, resilience means stopping. Sometimes it means saying, "I'm not okay," even when millions of eyes are watching. This is the story of Simone Biles. In the 2021 Olympics, Simone, already considered one of the greatest gymnasts in history, arrived carrying expectations heavier than any medal. She was the face of the Games, the one the world came to watch. But then something happened. In the middle of the competition, she developed what gymnasts call the twisties. Imagine being in midair, spinning at impossible speeds, and suddenly, your mind loses track of up and down, left and right. A fraction of a second of disorientation can break bones, Or worse, Simone was scared. Not the nerves before a performance kind of scared. The I could seriously hurt myself kind of scared. So she did something that shocked the world. She stepped back. People expected her to push through, to be superhuman. But Simone chose humanity. She chose mental health over medals. Many criticized her. Many misunderstood her. But years later, we see the truth. She wasn't showing weakness. She was showing a new form of strength. A quiet courage that said, I matter. My mind matters. My health matters. And here's the beautiful part. She came back. She returned to competition, not to prove something, but to heal something, and went on to redefine longevity in gymnastics, performing skills never seen before. Simone's resilience wasn't about enduring pain. It was about honoring herself enough to rest. Her story teaches us that resilience is not a straight line. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is pause before you break. Now I want to take you into the life of a man whose resilience was forged in flames, literally. His name is Jose Andres, a world-renowned chef. But his resilience story isn't about restaurants or Michelin stars. It's about disaster. It's about running toward devastation while the rest of the world runs away. After Hurricane Maria devastated Puerto Rico in 2017, there were towns without electricity, without clean water, without food. People were stranded, frightened, and hungry. Jose didn't wait for someone to send him. He got on a plane. He gathered volunteers. And he began cooking thousands, then tens of thousands, then hundreds of thousands of meals. He founded World Central Kitchen, an organization that rushes into disaster zones, wildfires, earthquakes, wars, to feed people who've lost everything. And here's the emotional heart of his story. In 2023, while aiding after a deadly wildfire in Hawaii, Jose lost friends, team members, when one of the aid vehicles crashed during an emergency mission. He was devastated. The grief was heavy. The work was dangerous. And for a moment, he questioned everything. But he kept going. Not because it was easy, because resilience called him to serve again. Jose Andres teaches us that resilience is love in action. It's the willingness to keep giving even when your heart is broken. It's believing that compassion can rebuild what tragedy has destroyed. Let's pause here, not to slow down, but to let meaning settle. Think of the 3 stories so far. Chris Nikic grew in 1% steps. Shania Twain rebuilt a voice from silence. Simone Biles rested in the spotlight. Jose Andres turned personal grief into global relief. Different people, different battles. One truth. Resilience is not one thing. Resilience is everything we become when life rearranges us. Some people break open. Some people break down. Some people break and become more whole than before. I want to introduce you to Sara Blakely, the founder of Spanx. Today, she's a billionaire entrepreneur. But before success, she was selling fax machines door to door. Most people don't even know what a fax machine is anymore. But back then, it meant knocking on doors, getting rejected, hearing no so often it became a rhythm. Sara had an idea for a new kind of undergarment. She believed in it. She made samples. She pitched manufacturers. And she was rejected over 200 times. People laughed at the idea. People dismissed her. People said it would never work. But Sara did something remarkable. Every night, she went home, closed the door, sat with her disappointment, and then she tried again. Her father used to ask her at the dinner table, "What did you fail at today?" It wasn't sarcasm. It was encouragement. It was permission to try boldly enough to fall. The day one manufacturer finally said yes, her life changed. But the part that matters is this. She didn't need 200 yeses. She only needed one. And she was willing to face 200 no's to get it. Resilience is not endurance for endurance's sake. It is remembering what you want despite the echo of every closed door. We've spent the first hour and a half exploring resilience through physical challenge, emotional trauma, mental struggle, disaster relief, and relentless pursuit. In the next section, we will go deeper into loss, identity, reinvention, and the very human fear of starting over. And I will share with you one of the most powerful modern stories of resilience in the face of overwhelming tragedy. Resilience is often talked about in motivational tones, like a muscle, a mindset, a victory. But sometimes resilience is quieter, heavier, more fragile. Sometimes it grows from the deepest pain a human being can experience. This is the story of Robbie Parker. In December of 2012, Robbie lost his 6-year-old daughter, Emily, in the Sandy Hook Elementary tragedy, a moment that shattered the world and shattered the hearts of 26 families forever. There is nothing more unnatural than a parent burying a child, nothing more unbearable, nothing more crushing. And yet, in the aftermath of this unimaginable loss, Robbie did something extraordinary. Just one day after losing Emily, he stepped in front of cameras, his face pale, trembling, swollen from tears, and spoke words no one expected. He expressed love. He expressed forgiveness. He offered condolences to the family of the shooter. That moment wasn't polished. It wasn't heroic in the movie sense. It was raw, human. A man standing in the ashes of his life, choosing compassion over hatred. Over the years, Robbie and his family have turned their grief into advocacy, love, and service. He says resilience didn't come all at once. It came in moments. Moments of choosing to keep loving. Moments of choosing to keep living. Moments of choosing to keep saying Emily's name. Robbie shows us that resilience is not about moving on. It's about moving forward, carrying the memory, the love, the heartbreak, and still choosing life. If you ever doubt the human capacity to endure, if you ever wonder how much pain a person can survive, remember J.R. Martinez. J.R. was a young soldier deployed to Iraq. In 2003, the Humvee he was driving hit a landmine and exploded. He was trapped inside the burning vehicle. He suffered severe burns over more than 90% of his body. His face, his arms, his head, his sense of identity, gone in seconds. He spent 34 months in recovery, dozens of surgeries, endless skin grafts, moments where he couldn't recognize the person in the mirror. At first, JR didn't want to live. Not like this. Not disfigured, not scarred, not changed so violently. But then something happened. Nurses began asking him to talk to other burn patients, people isolated by trauma, frightened of their new reflection. And when JR spoke to them, something inside him awakened. He realized, maybe my wounds can help someone else heal. He became a motivational speaker. He became an author. He became an actor on All My Children. And then he did something the world never expected. He competed on Dancing with the Stars and won. The man who once wished to hide became a symbol of courage, a reminder that perhaps the soul shines brightest through places once broken. Let me take you to a place hit by one of the deadliest earthquakes in recent history, Nepal 2015. Among the collapse, dust, and chaos lay a 4-month-old baby girl named Soniesha. She was buried for 22 hours. No food, no water, no airflow. Her tiny body surrounded by stone and darkness. Rescue workers thought no one else could be alive. And then they heard a faint cry. They dug with their hands, frantic, lifting debris piece by piece. And finally, they found her, blinking, covered in dust but breathing. A baby doesn't know how to fight. A baby doesn't strategize or plan. But something inside her, a primal, unstoppable instinct, refused to quit. She became a symbol for Nepal, a spark of hope in devastation. Her survival reminded the world that resilience doesn't always roar. Sometimes it cries softly through the rubble, saying, I am still here. Let's take a breath. Because these stories aren't small. They aren't easy. Resilience is not a pretty concept. It is not an inspirational poster or a feel-good slogan. Resilience is often born in fire, carved by grief, shaped by struggle. But these stories also tell us something deeper. Resilience lives in every human body. It is not given to the lucky. It is built by the living. You may never face what JR faced. You may never endure what Robbie endured. But you will face something. Everyone does. The question isn't, will life knock me down? The question is, who will I become when I stand back up? In the next section, Part 4, we'll explore resilience through reinvention, identity crises, unexpected life detours, and the long road back from personal collapse. I'll share stories of people who rebuilt careers, relationships, and self-worth after life dismantled everything they thought they were. Sometimes resilience isn't about surviving disaster or tragedy. Sometimes it's about enduring the slow, grinding erosion of other people's doubt. This is the story of Viola Davis. Before she became an Oscar, Emmy, and Tony winner, before the world watched her deliver thunderous monologues that shook entire rooms, Viola struggled silently. She grew up in deep poverty. She experienced hunger so severe she would chase rats away from boxes of crackers. She battled shame, insecurity, and the feeling of being invisible. And when she began acting, Hollywood told her she wasn't right, not pretty enough, not young enough, not the type. Roles were few, castings were harsh, characters offered to her were stereotypical, one-dimensional, and small. But Viola believed something powerful. My authenticity is my strength. She kept going. She kept auditioning. She kept fighting for roles that reflected real women, complex, flawed, stunning in their depth. And then, finally, the world caught up. She became the first black actor in history to win the Triple Crown of acting. Emmy, Oscar, Tony. A journey decades long. A journey built on perseverance, not privilege. Viola teaches us that resilience is not a single moment. It is a long conversation between you and your destiny, and you must speak louder than doubt. Now I want to bring you the story of Alex Smith, the NFL quarterback whose life changed in a single play. In 2018, Alex was hit in a tackle that broke the bones in his leg so severely that the doctors said the X-ray looked like shattered glass. But the break wasn't the real danger. A massive infection followed, one that nearly killed him. He underwent 17 surgeries. At one point, they asked him whether he wanted to amputate. His family feared the worst. His football career was assumed over. At times, his life was almost over. In photos from his hospital bed, you can see the external fixators, metal rods, and bolts holding his leg together. But what you can't see is the internal struggle. Will I walk again? Will I ever play with my kids in the yard? Will I ever be the same? Alex Smith not only relearned how to walk, he eventually stepped back onto an NFL field. People said it was impossible, reckless, unthinkable. But Alex didn't return to prove anything to the world. He returned because resilience called him forward, because his story wasn't finished. And when he walked onto that field wearing his uniform again, millions of people saw more than an athlete. They saw the embodiment of grit. They saw a man who refused to let fear close his story early. Close your eyes for a moment. Imagine you are an artist. Your world is made from color, shape, texture, movement. Your hands work, but your eyes guide. Now imagine losing the very thing that connects you to your art. This is what happened to Yvonne Felix, a Canadian visual artist. As a child, she was struck by a car. The accident damaged her eyes, and over time, her world faded. By adulthood, she was legally blind. Most people would step away from visual art. Most people would surrender to the loss of sight. But Yvonne did something extraordinary. She continued to create. Her paintings took on new meaning, alive with color she could no longer fully see, guided by memory, intuition, and the textures she felt with her hands. She began wearing special augmented reality glasses that helped her detect shapes and outlines. And then she did something even more powerful. She became an advocate for visual impairment technology, showing the world what was possible. Yvonne proved something profound. Losing one sense does not diminish the others. Losing one path does not erase the journey. Losing sight does not mean losing vision. Her resilience wasn't a loud declaration. It was a quiet dedication to continue creating beauty, even in the dark. There's a pattern in the stories we've heard so far. Viola Davis, Alex Smith, Yvonne Felix. 3 completely different worlds, 3 different battles, 3 different outcomes. And yet, the same truth echoes through each of them. Who you become under pressure reveals who you were meant to be all along. Resilience isn't something life gives us. It's something life reveals in us. Something we discover when the lights go out, when the door closes, when the dream slips through our fingers. Some people fight. Some people rebuild. Some people reinvent. And if you are listening to this right now, I want you to understand something deeply. You are more resilient than you know. You have survived every moment of humanity you've lived so far. Every heartbreak, every setback, every lonely night, every disappointment. You are here. And that means the story isn't over. In the next section, Part 5, we will move into resilience in reinvention, career collapse, financial ruin, and the courage to rewrite your life when everything familiar falls apart. I will bring you stories of people who lost everything: jobs, money, security, reputation, and still found a way to rise. Reinvention often begins in the flame of humiliation. Sometimes the lowest point of your life is the exact place where your future begins. This is the story of Howard Schultz, the man behind Starbucks. Before the stores on every corner, before the global presence, Before the empire, Howard was a kid from a housing project in Brooklyn. His father broke his hip on the job and lost the family's healthcare. That moment changed him. It planted the seed of his life's mission, to build a company where people mattered. Years later, after turning Starbucks into a global force, Howard stepped down as CEO. But when the company struggled, declining sales, sinking morale, scandals, the board asked him to return. This is where the resilience comes in. Howard walked into a company he had built with his heart and found it fractured. Some people doubted him. Some said he was too old. Some said the brand had grown beyond anyone's ability to repair. But he came back anyway. He grounded himself in the purpose that shaped him as a child, making work dignified, meaningful, human. He traveled to thousands of stores. He listened to employees, baristas, shift leaders, managers. He asked them not, "What's wrong?" but, "What do you need?" And piece by piece, Starbucks began healing. Not through genius, but through humility. Not through PR, but through presence. Howard's story teaches us that resilience is not only about climbing from the ground up, it's about returning to your roots when the world shakes you loose. Now I want to tell you about Daniel Jacobs, a professional boxer known as the Miracle Man. Daniel had everything going for him: talent, speed, a rising career. But in 2011, he was diagnosed with a rare form of bone cancer that left him partially paralyzed. Doctors told him he might never walk again, let alone fight. He spent months in a hospital bed. He lost vision temporarily in one eye due to nerve damage. He fought through chemotherapy, surgeries, and the fear that his entire identity had been taken from him. But Daniel did something extraordinary. He believed in possibility even when probability was against him. He learned to walk again. He trained again. He rebuilt his body from zero. And in 2014, 3 years after doctors wondered whether he'd survive, Daniel returned to the ring and became a world champion. He named himself the Miracle Man, not because he thought he was superhuman, but because he believed in something deeper. My purpose isn't determined by what tried to break me. Let's talk about a woman whose resilience literally reshaped modern personal finance. Suze Orman. Today, she's one of the most recognized financial advisors in the world. At the beginning of her story, it was messy, painful, humbling. Suze moved to California with dreams of opening a restaurant. She had no financial education, no understanding of investments, no guidance. She trusted a bank with her life savings, money that friends had loaned her in good faith. And then it happened. She lost everything, all of it, gone in a failed investment scheme she didn't understand. She was devastated, ashamed, broken. She filed for bankruptcy. But instead of letting that failure destroy her, Suze allowed it to educate her. She got a job as a financial advisor, even though she didn't know what she was doing at first. She studied every day. She asked questions relentlessly. She sharpened her instincts through trial, error, and humility. And over time, she became a force. Her books became bestsellers. Her shows reached millions. Her guidance helped everyday people escape the financial traps she once fell into herself. Suze's story teaches us that resilience doesn't protect you from mistakes. It transforms them into mastery. Let's take a pause. Howard Schultz rebuilt a fractured company. Daniel Jacobs rebuilt a broken body. Suze Orman rebuilt a broken life. Different paths, different wounds, same essence. Resilience is reinvention. It is the art of becoming someone new without losing who you are. Most people believe resilience is about bouncing back. But the truth, the deeper truth, is that you rarely go back to who you were. You become someone stronger, someone wiser, someone shaped by fire, but not consumed by it. In the next section, Part 6, we will explore resilience in relationships, love, identity, burnout, and belonging. I will bring you stories of individuals who rebuilt themselves after heartbreak, betrayal, and emotional collapse. The quiet battles no one sees but everyone understands. Resilience doesn't only show up in hospitals, disaster zones, or boardrooms. Sometimes it shows up in the quietest, most personal corners of the heart. This is the story of Adele. Adele is known for her powerhouse voice, her humor, and her emotional honesty. But behind the album sales and the awards, she lived through something deeply human: the collapse of her marriage, and the collapse of her identity with it. After her divorce, she described feeling like she was disintegrating, like the foundation she built her life upon had cracked. She questioned everything: her role as a mother, her sense of worth, her purpose as an artist. And here's where resilience enters. Adele didn't rush into the public eye with a forced smile. She stepped away. She went to therapy. She read books. She confronted the wounds she had carried since childhood. She worked out, not to lose weight, but to lose anxiety, to breathe again. And when she returned, she didn't hide the pain. She sang it. She crafted an album, 30, that became a letter to her son, a confession to the world, and a testimony to the resilience required to start over. Adele shows us that resilience is not a performance. It is the courage to face yourself, to grieve honestly, to heal without rushing. This is the story of Malala Yousafzai, one of the clearest modern symbols of resilience, not just for women, but for humanity. As a young girl in Pakistan, Malala loved school. She believed education was a human right, and she spoke about it publicly, even as extremist groups tried to silence girls' voices. At age 15, while riding a bus home, she was targeted and shot in the head by a Taliban gunman for speaking up. The attack was intended to silence her forever. Instead, it made her voice impossible to ignore. Malala survived. She recovered. She moved to the UK for safety, and she continued speaking, louder than before, stronger than before, braver than before. She became the youngest Nobel Prize laureate in history. But beneath the headlines is a human truth. Malala battled fear, nightmares, trauma, and massive pressure. She wasn't fearless, she was resilient. She acted despite fear. She healed while helping others heal. Her story reminds us that resilience is not the absence of fear. It is the decision that your purpose matters more than your pain. Many people know Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson for his movies, his charm, his physical strength. But fewer know the emotional strength forged inside him. In interviews, Dwayne has spoken openly about experiencing severe depression in his early 20s. After losing a football career he had dreamed of since childhood, after being let go from the CFL with just $7 in his pocket, he spiraled. He felt lost, directionless, unseen. But he reached out. He talked to people he trusted. He opened up, something he once viewed as weakness. That vulnerability became a turning point. His entire life trajectory changed when he allowed himself to feel instead of hide. He rebuilt from the lowest point of his career. He became one of the most recognizable entertainers in the world. And now he uses his platform to speak openly about mental health, reminding people, you're not alone. You're not broken. You're human. Dwayne's story shows us that resilience isn't just physical toughness, it is emotional openness. It is telling the truth about how you feel so you can begin to climb again. Let me introduce you to Brené Brown, a research professor who became famous for studying something most people avoid: shame, vulnerability, and emotional courage. Before her first TED talk went viral, Brené experienced something she openly calls a spiritual awakening, though she admits it felt more like a breakdown. Her research on vulnerability forced her to confront her own unwillingness to be vulnerable. She realized she was living armored, avoiding discomfort, hiding imperfections, numbing fear with overwork. The pressure caught up with her. She hit an emotional wall. She sought therapy. She faced the patterns she had avoided for decades. And from that painful unraveling came her life's most important work. Her books, talks, and teachings now help millions understand that vulnerability is not weakness. It is the birthplace of resilience. Brené teaches us that resilience begins the moment you stop pretending you're okay. Adele showed us heartbreak. Malala showed us courage under fire. Dwayne showed us emotional honesty. Brené showed us inner transformation. These aren't battles of bone and blood. These are battles of identity, battles of belonging, battles of self-worth. The hardest struggles are not always the ones we can see. Sometimes the deepest fight is the one inside your chest, the quiet war of believing you deserve love, peace, and healing. And these stories teach us something essential. Resilience is relational. We break in relationships, and we heal in them too. In the next section, Part 7, we will explore resilience in reinvention at scale. Social movements, community heroes, modern humanitarian leaders, and the people who lift entire groups of others through their courage. Sometimes resilience doesn't start with a grand vision. Sometimes it begins with a neighbor knocking on a neighbor's door. In the early days of the COVID-19 pandemic, fear swept through communities. People were isolated. Shelves were empty. Jobs vanished. Families didn't know where their next meal would come from. and in the heart of Toronto lived a man named Mohammed Farki, a restaurant owner known locally for his generosity long before the world noticed him. When the lockdowns began, Mohammed didn't ask, "How can I protect my business?" His first question was, "Who around me will not eat tonight?" He opened his restaurants not for profit, but for service. He cooked for frontline healthcare workers, hospital staff, shelters, and food banks. When nursing homes were overwhelmed, he delivered meals to exhausted caregivers. When unemployment soared, he ensured vulnerable families received groceries. He didn't rescue one person. He helped feed hundreds of thousands. Not because he was rich, not because he was powerful, but because he understood something profound. Resilience is contagious. When one person stands up, it gives others permission to rise too. Muhammad's story is not about fame. It is about responsibility, the kind that begins in the heart and radiates outward. This is the story of Autumn Peltier, a young indigenous water protector from Canada, a teenager who taught the world that strength has no minimum age. Autumn grew up in the Anishinaabe community where water is sacred. At 8 years old, she learned that many indigenous communities across Canada had long-term boil water advisories. Children her age couldn't drink from the tap. Entire towns lived without clean water. Most people would feel sad. Autumn felt called. She began speaking, first at local gatherings, then at national events, then on international stages. By the time she was 13, she addressed the United Nations, demanding global leaders protect water. Her voice trembled. Her hands sometimes shook, but her message did not. She said, "Water is alive. Water is our first medicine." She wasn't fearless. She was resilient. She stood in front of adults who dismissed her. She faced online criticism. She carried the weight of her community's pain. And she kept going. Autumn reminds us that resilience not only rebuilds, it protects. It protects land, people, and future generations. In 2018, deadly wildfires ripped across California, destroying entire towns in hours. In the chaos, evacuation orders went out, but many people, seniors, hospital patients, children, were trapped. Firefighters raced into the inferno. Among them was Captain Daniel Trevino, a man who later said, "I wasn't scared of dying. I was scared of not reaching them in time." Daniel and his crew drove through walls of flame, guided only by instinct and a map covered in ash. They broke down doors, lifted people into trucks, carried wheelchair users out as roofs collapsed behind them. They rescued dozens that night. Some of them the firefighters never learned the names of. When asked how he found the strength, Daniel said, "Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's deciding someone else's life is worth walking through your fear." His story is a reminder. Resilience is not always quiet or poetic. Sometimes it is raw and urgent, the kind that runs toward danger because humanity depends on it. In 2020, when cities shut down and loneliness became its own kind of epidemic, a woman in New York named Chelsea Pottinger, a mental health advocate who had overcome severe postnatal depression years earlier, recognized something familiar. People weren't just afraid of illness, they were afraid of being alone with their minds. Drawing from her own past, Chelsea began offering free online mindfulness sessions, stress management tools, and resilience workshops for people around the world. Her calls sometimes had tens of thousands of participants, students, parents, teachers, nurses, first responders. She wasn't selling anything. She was giving what she once needed. She taught people to breathe again when anxiety felt suffocating, to rest without guilt, to reconnect with themselves. Her resilience became a roadmap for others, proof that when you heal yourself, you don't just rise, you pull others up with you. Muhammad fed communities. Autumn fought for water. Captain Trevino saved lives. Chelsea healed isolation. These stories share one truth. Resilience is not only personal, it is communal. It does not exist in isolation. It flows from one person to another like light through open windows. Resilience begins inside you, but it never stays there. It ripples. It reaches. It raises others. And this is how the world heals. Not through one hero, but through millions of ordinary people choosing to do extraordinary things. We are approaching the final hour of this speech. In Part 8, we will explore deep integration, how resilience becomes identity, how your story becomes strength, and how to carry everything you've learned into the future. As we enter the final stretch, I want to remind you that resilience is not always about surviving in silence or acting alone. Sometimes it's about turning pain into beauty that reaches the world. This is the story of Lady Gaga. Behind the sequins, the theatrics, and the fame lies a story of deep struggle. She has been candid about battling PTSD, chronic pain, depression, and anxiety. Her early years were riddled with bullying, self-doubt, and a sense of isolation. Many would have given up. Many would have hidden away. But Lady Gaga chose to create through her pain. She founded the Born This Way Foundation, aimed at supporting youth mental health, empowering self-expression, and building resilience in communities often ignored. Through her music, her speeches, and her advocacy, she transformed personal trauma into a lifeline for millions. Her resilience became a mirror for others, showing that survival is not enough. We can thrive, inspire, and heal together. Resilience is also scientific. It's often invisible, gradual, and painstaking. Consider Katalin Karikó, whose work underpins the mRNA vaccines that changed the course of the COVID-19 pandemic. For decades, Katalin faced skepticism, rejection, and lack of funding. Her ideas were considered fringe. Colleagues dismissed her. Her experiments repeatedly failed. She was in her 30s, 40s, 50s, still struggling to get institutions to take her seriously. But she persisted. She published. She experimented. She refined. She refused to let professional rejection define her work. And eventually, her persistence paid off. Her research became the backbone of vaccines that have saved millions of lives globally. Katalin's story shows that resilience can be quiet, persistent, and profoundly world-changing, even if recognition comes late. Not all stories need fame or billions. Some are quietly transformative. Consider Desmond Doss, reimagined in modern context through his values and legacy, a person who refuses to pick up a weapon, instead dedicating himself to saving lives during conflict or disaster. In the modern era, ordinary people like frontline medical workers, volunteers during natural disasters, or teachers in underserved communities embody the same courage. They face extreme pressure, trauma, and exhaustion, yet they persist, adapt, and protect others. Resilience, here, is both ordinary and extraordinary. It is choosing daily to be present, kind, and proactive even when circumstances seem overwhelming. Let us pause and reflect on all the stories. Chris Nickick, Small Steps, Patient Persistence. Shania Twain, Rebuilding Identity Through Vocal Loss. Simone Biles, Courage to Rest. Jose Andres, Grief Transformed into Service. Sarah Blakely, Facing 200 No's for One Yes. Robbie Parker, Loving Through Grief. J.R. Martinez and Alex Smith, Physical and Emotional Rebirth. Autumn Peltier and Mohammed Faki, Protecting Others Through Action. Lady Gaga and Katalin Karikó, Transforming Personal Struggle into Global Impact. Across all stories, the core elements emerge: endurance, staying present, even in pain; adaptability, learning, growing, and pivoting when life changes; courage, stepping into fear, uncertainty, and vulnerability; service, recognizing that personal resilience becomes communal; purpose, finding meaning in hardship and using it as fuel. Resilience is not linear. It is not constant. It is often messy, unpredictable, and profoundly human. To conclude, I want to share one final reflection. Every story we have explored, whether it is of global fame, quiet courage, or unseen struggle, is part of the same human mosaic. Resilience is not something reserved for the elite, the famous, or the chosen. It is in the teacher who stays late to help a struggling student. It is in the parent who holds their child while they cry themselves to sleep. It is in the friend who calls just to listen. It is in the scientist who refuses to give up after decades of failure. It is in the person reading this now, choosing to keep going. All resilience is worthy. All resilience matters. All resilience ripples outward, unseen, until it touches lives you may never know. As we draw this journey to a close, I want you to hold one truth in your heart. Your life, your story, your struggles are part of the resilience of humanity. Every choice to rise, to try again, to love, to create, to serve, to heal, builds not only you, but the world. So when life knocks you down, pause if you need to, rest if you must, adapt and learn. Take one small step forward, and then another. The human spirit is infinitely capable. It bends, it stretches, it breaks, and it heals stronger than before. You are resilient. You are powerful. You are a story yet unfolding,